This is video number 1 for sections 1.5 and 1.6, finding the equation of a line using y equals mx plus b. This is a very, very important lesson. The skills in this lesson are going to stick around for quite a bit of time, so I very much encourage you to do a lot of practicing in sections 1.5 and 1.6. The goal is really to determine how we could come up with the equation of a line if we knew some information about it. And it turns out there are really two different methods for doing that task. In this video, I'm going to concentrate on showing you how you can use the y equals mx plus b equation directly in order to find the equation of a line. The first couple examples that I have on here are of the easier variety, and I say that because if the slope, that's the m, and the y-intercept, that's the b, if those two items are pretty easy to find, then you can write down the answer without doing a whole lot of work at all. For example, look at this first problem. We're trying to find the equation of a line. Here's what we know about it. It is parallel to this other line, y equals 3/4 x plus 6, and it goes through the point 0, -2. You know what the best part of this problem is? This right here. Because when you see a 0 in the x position, you know you're dealing with a point that is on the y-axis. In other words, this is the y-intercept. Well, if they hand me the y-intercept, then I know the b. The -2 is going to be the b. If I can just figure out the slope, I'm basically done with this problem. Well, we have already learned that parallel lines have the same slope. I can see that the slope of this line is 3/4, right, the number in front of the x. That means my slope is also 3/4. In other words, for my line, the one I'm trying to write down, we have just figured out the slope is equal to 3/4 and the b is equal to -2. Well, then I can write my answer down really without doing any more work. Looks like the final answer would be y equals 3/4 x minus 2. So if you've got the slope and y-intercept information, you can easily write down the equation of the line. Look at the second example. Maybe not quite as easy, but still pretty nice. I'm trying to find the equation of a line. This time I'm simply given 2 points that are on the line. And what you want to stand out to you is this point right here, because again, it's got a 0 in the x position. So this is, once again, the y-intercept. That's great. So if I can just find the slope, then I'll be able to write the equation of the line. Well, they didn't hand it to me. I am going to have to work for it, but we have a little formula for that, right? Take the second y minus the first y, and then on the bottom, the second x minus the first x. And obviously, I'm going to grab a calculator here and do a little bit of work. Let's see, these two guys plus out. I'm ending up with -0.5 on the top, -0.3 on the bottom. Remember, when you've got a decimal inside a fraction, that's considered unsimplified. So you would finish this off by dividing these two numbers on the calculator. And it turns out it's not a nice answer. If this was a homework problem, they would tell you where to round. I'm seeing 1.666666 on the calculator. Let's say that the directions told us to round the slope to 2 decimal places. Then I would get about 1.67 for the slope. That's the only work I need to do in order to write down the equation of this line, because now I know the slope. It's always y equals the slope, then the x, plus the b. The b is the y-intercept. I've known that from the very beginning, the -2.3. And so again, here would be the solution to the problem. Okay, now what do you do if it's not quite so easy? And that's really now the main task of this video. How do I find the equation of a line, especially if they don't just hand me the y-intercept? Take a look at this third example. Find the equation of the line, very similar to the last one, right? Here's 2 points that it goes through. It looks even nicer because they're not decimals, but this problem is going to require more work because I have not been handed the y-intercept. There's no 0 in an x position. I don't know what that is, so I'm going to have to figure it out. Well, let me show you how you can do this problem using just y equals mx plus b. Just like the last problem, I'm going to start by figuring out the slope. I know I can do that without too much difficulty. So second y minus first y, second x minus first x. Be careful with all those minus signs. Looks like a 4 on the top. These guys will plus out and give me a 5 on the bottom. In this problem, you would be expected to leave this as 4/5. Don't go to a decimal unless there are decimals in the problem. So 4/5 would be my slope. Again, as we said, I don't have the b. I don't have the y-intercept. So how will I find it? Well, what I can do, I know that the final answer is going to look like y equals mx plus b. I know that that's the format of the answer. It's a line. I also know the slope. So I think I'll go ahead and fill that in. The m is 4/5. We've calculated that. The only thing I wish I knew that I don't know is the b. How am I going to get it? Well, think about what I do have. Even though I don't have the b, I do have over here a couple of x, y points that I know are on the line. And here's the thing. If they're on the line, then I know that they have to make the equation of the line true. In other words, I can plug that information into this equation, and I know I can do that because those points are on the line. Well, look, if I fill in an x and I fill in a y, you know, the only letter left will be the b, and I can solve for it and be done. I like to call this the temporary plug-in approach. I'm not going to permanently plug in an x and a y. I know that my final answer is going to look like this. The m is going to be filled in. The b is going to be filled in. There's going to be an x and a y in my final answer, but temporarily, to help me find the b, let me go ahead and pick one of these points and stick it in. So there, you can use either one you want. I'll just go ahead and use this one. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go to this equation. Everywhere I see the y, I will put a 2. And then everywhere I see the x, I will put a -1. Maybe a parentheses would be helpful there to indicate the multiplication. Solve this equation for b, and you're all set. As far as how to solve it, here's what I would suggest that you do. Even if you don't like fractions, I would suggest starting by at least doing this multiplication. Multiplying fractions is pretty easy, right? Put a 1 under this, and then you're just going straight across. So 4 times -1, -4. 5 times 1 is 5. But then at this stage, I think you have a couple of choices. If you are unhappy with the fraction here, you could now clear the fractions. And that would be great. You don't have to do that. You could always solve for b by adding 4/5 to both sides. You'd have to get a common denominator and all that. But my guess is that many of you would be happier if instead of doing that, you go ahead and you just clear the fractions. Let's see what that looks like. So lowest common denominator would be 5. And to clear the fractions, I would just need to multiply this by 5 and this by 5. Remember, it's all or nothing. And this by 5. Sometimes people forget about that b. Everybody needs to get the 5. And now watch what happens. On the left side, I get a 10. On the right side, these 5s cancel. -4, great. And then b times 5 is 5b. And now that the fractions are cleared, I can finish solving this equation easily. Add that 4 to both sides, and then divide both sides by 5. And it looks like the b comes out to be not a nice number, right? 14/5. is the B. Well, that's all I needed to know. I did all of that so that I could figure out the B. Remember, we knew the final answer was going to look something like this. Y equals 4/5 x plus something. I just wasn't sure what the something is. Now I can fill it in. It is 14/5. That process that I just went through, that temporary plug-in process, is so very important. And so, again, it's just vital that you practice it as you're going through this lesson, the handout, the homework, and all of that. One last thing to mention. Your graphing calculator can help you to check a problem like this, and I thought you would appreciate seeing how that would work. So I'm on the main screen of the calculator. Let me go to the y equals area and type our answer in. So remember, this is a check. I would have done all that math, and then I'm typing in 4/5 x plus 14/5. And then I would go to maybe the Zoom standard window. I don't really have any reason not to, so Zoom 6. And I've got a line here. All I really need to check is, are those 2 points that I was given on the line? Well, that's where that trace button comes in. If you choose trace, the first point back on the handout was -1, 2. So hit trace, type in -1, hit enter, and see if that's where it takes you. Sure enough, there it is, -1, 2. Let's try the other point. If I hit trace and I type 4, the other point on the handout was 4, 6, and I hit enter, sure enough, 4, 6. And that really proves it. That means I did this problem correctly. Those 2 points are on the line. As I mentioned at the beginning, this process, this temporary plug-in process, is so important. Make sure you do an excellent job of practicing it.